Thank you so much for joining us on the Dwelling Show. I'm your host, Ola Dantes. I've got the amazing Chad Duval with us today. How you doing, Chad?
Good. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Doing fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. Can you just kind of tell our Dwell listeners who you are, what you've been up to, and kind of what you're doing lately?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. I guess I've been in real estate since 2014, going way back. I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire, to a middle-class family, kind of surrounded by the entrepreneurs. Both my parents had businesses, so I got to see that firsthand. It kind of grew up. My dad had a painting business. My mom had a cleaning business. And then worked with them for years, to scrape up some extra cash and that sort of thing. And then kind of helped my parents when they bought their first rental property and kind of saw the value in that. That was back in high school, I believe. And then I went off to college, kicking and screaming, but my parents said I had to go. So I went to college, had a great time, didn't do that well school-wise, but had a great time. And the whole time I was there, I was working part-time with my parents, back and forth. So I went to a local school that was only about a half an hour from my parents. And then graduated from that and decided that I wanted to try the world firsthand by myself without working for my parents, and decided to move out to California. I had no job. This was in 08, 09, and tried to get a job in finance. And as everybody knows, that was not the best time to try and find a job in finance. So then I ended up, just doing all kinds of odd jobs. I think I worked at Kohl's overnight, stocking shelves. I worked at a Sherwin-Williams, stocking paint. And then I got the call from my dad and said, "Hey, how about you fly back and start working for us a little bit here? We'll help you, fly you back for 2 weeks, put you to work, make some money, and fly you back." So I did that for a couple months too, until I finally got my first break in aerospace. I was always a little bit of a geek and liked airplanes. And so I started working in that, and that's where I've been working in ever since. I've been in aerospace for about 10 years. And then let me think, was it 2014? I finally bought my first house, and it was a turning point because my parents kind of suggested, "Hey, if you're going to buy a house, why don't you buy a duplex? That way you can live in one side, rent out the other, and, kind of live for free and kind of, start in real estate," because they knew the value of it because they had a rental property and they owned their house. And after months and months, I finally went and got a pre-approval and started looking for properties. And ever since, I got a property under contract and closed on it. But that was kind of the start into my path into real estate.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. That is such a long synopsis, but I really love it because, when somebody goes on your page, for example, on Instagram, they're like, "Oh my God, look at this guy. He's so lucky. He's doing real estate. Look at him. He's just, he's just an overnight success." But looking at the timeline, I'm taking some notes here. You started in 2004. However, you bought your first property in 2014. So a 10-year gap of constantly working with your parents in real estate, grinding. Also taking a risk of moving to California, at kind of in the deep of the recession in 2008 to get a finance job, right? So yeah. I'm kind of teasing these things out because it kind of shows that you were able to take risks, right? Real life risk, like, who moves to California, the most expensive real estate market, and, find to live in, to try to get a job in a recession.
I know. Well, and I forgot the little piece too. So as soon as I graduated, my uncle actually was a manager at a local bank. And so when I decided that I didn't want to work for my parents at that time and I wanted to try something new, I thought finance would be good. I looked at all these movies and finance and Wall Street. I was like, "Oh my God, I'll make a ton of money doing this." So I was on the search for something that I could make a lot of money, something that I have fun with. So I reached out to my uncle and actually got a job with that bank. I think it was right after I graduated. So I went and worked for him for 3 months. But of course it was 08, and 3 months into it, we all showed up to the bank and it was locked and we had no job. So even my uncle didn't know about it, none of us. So at that point they closed the branch. We were all out of a job. And at that point, I guess it was kind of super risky and kind of not the best plan. But then I was like, all right, I'll just pick up and move to California. Why not?
Yeah,
You know,
why?
so I used it as an opportunity, take some risks and explore my options out there. So.
Yeah, and it looked like it worked out. So you got your first duplex. You did pretty well. You can, you can kind of walk us through, that process. You said you got a pre-approval. How did you have to do any rehabs? You can kind of share the numbers with us if you want to, or just any other deal that you're comfortable with. How did that
Sure.
process go for you?
Yeah. So that first deal, I guess, is probably the most important one for me because, like I said, I was studying real estate. I was listening to podcasts, reading books. And when my parents finally told me that my cousin had bought a duplex and lived on one side and was basically living rent free, it kind of clicked in my head after reading all these books and everything. Like, oh, this is what everybody's talking about. This is what I got to do. So, my first step was I went and got a pre-approval. And again, I had a little bit of good resources. I had my parents, I had my uncle. So I went to my uncle and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to buy a house. I want to do it really cheaply. How do I get into a house? And he proposed the USDA loan, basically a rural development loan, which is, in short, it's basically you can buy a house with little money down in a certain geographical area. The USDA will loan a mortgage to you. So it's basically like an FHA loan. So I pursued that, got a pre-approval, and then started looking for duplexes, looking for houses, and finally stumbled upon this 3-2 in a small little town in Connecticut. And it had, what caught my eye is the upstairs was nice. The kitchen was all redone. It would have been great to live in it, but then I looked at the basement and it was partially finished. The full basement was partially finished. So it had like a water hookup down there. So I knew I could put a small little kitchenette. I could hook up and put a bathroom in there. So, so that all, looked really good for me. So I put an offer in it. I got it for $189,000. And my uncle gave me a little trick. So he said, go in, put an offer in at the full listing price, but then negotiate all your closing costs into that so the seller can pay for it. So with a very low down payment, I think I got under a contract for $500. I gave them full asking price. They agreed to fix a few things and pay all my closing costs. So it was, I don't remember exactly how the math worked, but at closing, I actually got a check. Like, it was crazy. I actually got a check. It was for a couple $100. It wasn't a lot, but it was like, wow, I got into this house thinking I had to come up with all this money. And now I can go into it. I have some money now to rehab the basement a little bit and then live rent free. So it was a really cool deal. So
Fantastic.
That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm guessing you lived in the basement and kind of rent the main part of the house. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So me and my dad spent a couple months, finishing up. We took a bunch of so he's a contractor. So he was doing some properties and they were actually gutting some old houses and stuff like that. So I was able to reuse some of their old cabinets and, we put in a very, very, very cheap bathroom and that sort of thing. So we did it on the cheap. I think I built part of our countertops out of some IKEA like shelving units, and I put them all together and screwed them together and, totally did it on the cheap. I think I only spent like a couple $1,000, which I think I even put it on like a credit card or a Home Depot card or something like that.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I really, really like that story. So if there's somebody listening on our conversation, they're like, wow, and they've been telling themselves like, I don't have any money, I don't know how to get started. You just closed the deal, where you were trying to raise at least 500 to close them, but you actually got money back. And then obviously when you closed on it, you were really, really scrappy and bootstrapped this project to, kind of make your goal, reality. What would you say to that person that is kind of telling themselves like, I cannot do this, I cannot start, I don't have any money, I don't have any contact? What do you say to that person?
Well, it's kind of funny because I was, going through all of that, I thought of all these scenarios where I couldn't do it. I thought, everything was scary. Everything was risky. I don't have money for this. But every time I took a step forward, I went and got that pre-approval. Or I went and talked to somebody and they told me about this loan, product that was super cheap. Every time I took a step forward, there was always a bunch of different avenues that would appear that you never saw before. So, I mean, that's the greatest advice I can give, is just to take that first step. And for me, I mean, I tell everybody, go look at those USDA rural development loans. Even if you like living in the city, if you could do it for a year, move to the suburbs, find a place where you can get this loan product, live in it for a year, then move out of it, it at least gets you in the game. So those are my two things that I
Oh
usually
man,
tell
thank
people.
you so much for that. It's that famous saying, like, 1,000 steps starts with, your
Just
very
one.
first step. Yeah, right.
Yep.
Or,
Mhm.
I think there's another one where you can't wait for all the stop lights or traffic lights to go green before you actually go.
Right.
Right.
Oh, I like that one. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And I didn't realize that until I bought that first property and went through that process. And it was a really good lesson. I hope people can at least take something from that.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, that's kind of the goal of the podcast, to just kind of motivate folks to really think differently and kind of push themselves to get to, wherever the end goal is for them. So I think this is a good segue for us. So you got this property, got it, and then you got your first rent check, and you were like, oh my goodness, this actually works. Somebody's actually paying me money, to do this, right? What did you do next? And what was that process like?
So I did that. I got my first rent check. It was to this younger couple that were working at a local school in that town. I think they were in their mid-20s. So I was roughly that age too. So we kind of meshed together. So they moved into this, the upstairs, which again was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And, I started doing that for about a year. And after about a year of doing it, I really realized something about landlord/tenant relationships, and that I probably would not want to live on the property of a tenant, because every time they see you, there's something broken. Every time they see you, there's an issue. If they get behind on rent, then you got to like mention every time you see them. And so I really, I guess, and also too, when these first tenants came in, I didn't know what a lease was. I kind of screwed up on my lease, and there's a lot of like loopholes in it. They allowed somebody to move in off of Craigslist as a roommate, and that person ultimately broke into my unit downstairs and stole a bunch of stuff. And so, it was a huge learning experience. And I think going forward, I'll never ever rent to somebody that I'm living in the same property with. But yeah, so I did that for a year. And decided, I don't want to do this anymore. I like the money. I like being a landlord, but I just need to move away. So at that time, I had met somebody, and she was living in Boston. So I was in Connecticut. She was in Boston. My parents were in New Hampshire. A bunch of family and friends were up in New Hampshire. So I decided that this would be a good opportunity to go live the city life, move off to Boston, be closer to family, and then maybe rent out that full property in Connecticut and try it that way. So that's what I did. I ended up moving up there. And I think I was up there for about a year after I moved out, and started, getting the bug again, and actually starting to look for, more properties. And at the time, I kind of had listened to a lot of Grant Cardone. I'm sure a lot of your listeners listen to him. Uncle G, he's crazy, and he gets you to think a lot bigger. So at that time, he was screaming this to me, and I was looking at properties, and I saw this 9-unit pop up in the town over from where I grew up. And it was 9 units. And the reason why it caught my attention is because in the description, it had said that the seller would carry a note or do seller financing. So for me, I still didn't have a lot of money to put down on a property. So that caught my eye. And that's the pursuit that I went after, and ultimately got that property under contract and closed on that with very little down, because again, it was a seller financing deal. And I was able to meet with them and kind of, earn their trust, and kind of go in with a low down payment. They financed the rest, and actually we just refinanced it a couple months ago too. So, but yes, that's where my next step led me to.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. It's just really fascinating that you're saying a lot, but, I really hope the Duval listeners are picking this. So you lived in this property, and you're like, well, I don't really like it. I'm going to move, right? And then you just up and leave. People are like, sometimes we all think that we have to stay somewhere because, I grew up here, or this is my new city, or this is my city. But you're just like kind of ready to up and leave. Like you went to California, you're from New Hampshire, and then you went to Connecticut, and then you went to Boston. So I'm just kind of bringing this out for anyone that is listening to this and thinking, well, I'm not sure if I want to move because I like my comfortable life in the suburbs. I don't want to go buy a duplex in the city and have to find parking. That's what I had to do when I was starting out. Same story to you, similar story to yours in my first duplex. But I think we have to push ourselves to just like, edge out and take that risk of going to a new city, or trying a new approach, right? So I really like that you're sharing that. And then before you know, you're you're buying your multifamily, you're refinancing, you're getting a note. It's kind of the same thing that you said. Is when you make that first step,
Mhm.
everything else just starts to fall in line, So
Well, that's exactly what happened with that property too. I didn't know where I was going to get that money for it. I started talking to the broker, found out, and I saw that it was a seller financing deal, tried to dig into them, talk to them a few times. And again, things would just reveal themselves. And I guess a lot of, those two properties too, at the time I was listening to a lot of podcasts and reading a lot. I had a lot of enthusiasm. So as I was going and taking a step forward, there was a lot of things being pushed at me that I was listening to that would open up even more. So it kind of helped me get through that. And yeah, it's crazy that,
Yeah, the
you go
universe kind of meets you, right? When you move
yeah,
towards the universe, right? Or God,
exactly.
whatever
Mhm.
anyone believes in. So I really love that. I can keep going. Yeah, I can keep going on every single deal you've done, but we obviously don't have enough time. I think you're doing a terrific job. So we're definitely dwelling into the quick round. These are going to be quick questions, quick answers. You ready, sir?
Absolutely.
All right. First question. What makes Chad unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy or the next girl?
Actually, I just had a conversation with my girlfriend about this actually last night. It's a strength of mine, but I think it can be looked at as a downfall as well. But when I get into something, I get narrow focus, and I focus like 150% of my time on that. And so it helps me propel myself forward. But at the same time, some other things drop. I can't keep all the plates spinning at all times. But I think ultimately it's a positive score at the end of the day game.
Awesome. Second question. What was the last book that you read, and what was the one thing that you picked up from that book?
So again, like I said, I listen to a lot of books, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. But the last book I actually read, I think it was Splitting the Difference by what's his name, Chris Voss. That was really good. The thing that I can remember that I took out of that, using the word fair in negotiations, it does something to the person on the other side of the table that actually brings you guys closer when you're negotiating anything in life, but specifically real estate.
Yeah, that's definitely a favorite one, has been mentioned on the Dwelling Show numerous times. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Last question. You've got your 9 units. You're still managing your out-of-state property, your duplex, and you're obviously doing all this other stuff, spending time with your girlfriend, I'm sure. What do you do for fun?
Actually, every morning, me and Holly, we get up at 4:30 in the morning and we go to the gym. That's our happy place. We spend a lot of time there. What else do we do? I like to hike and mountain bike, snowboard, those sort of things. Of course, I grew up in New Hampshire, so there's a lot of outdoor activity. So yeah, and of course, real estate.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Of course. If there's a Dual listener, a fly on the wall, listening in on our conversation, they're like, wow, I really like this chat guy, perhaps they're in the Boston market or obviously anywhere in the country, and they want to get to know you more or just connect with you, where's the best place that folks can reach out, get to know you better?
I guess there's two places. The main place, of course, is Instagram. That's where we connected. I am Chad Duval. That's Duval. That's where I spent all my time, interacting with, our little community there that we started creating. And, but you can also check me out at chadduval.com.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Chad. Really appreciate your time. It's been an amazing time just chatting with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.